So welcome to You're Doing It Wrong, 10 things not to do if you want to make it big in email. And this is really less focused on the programs that we manage and more about us as email professionals and the decisions that we make and the things that we do that can propel our careers forward. I'm Andrea Short. I'm a senior strategist here at Brightwave, and I am joined by Jenna Matson.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jenna Matson. I'm a platform engineer here at Brightwave. And we are on stage with a group of amazing email experts here. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. So I'm Robert Consoli. I'm the Director of Global Deliverability and ISP Relations at Adobe.
I'm John Parisi. I'm the Head of Customer Marketing at Kabbage. Kabbage is based here in Atlanta. We're an online lender to small businesses. Thanks, David.
I am Mary Abrahamson. I'm the email marketing manager at Ferguson Enterprises. Ferguson Enterprises is a top distributor of HVAC, waterworks, plumbing supplies, and I've had the awesome opportunity to be in the email marketing industry specifically for my whole career.
I'm Paige Farrow. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing at Char-Broil. We make grills and smokers.
Okay, so without further ado, we'll get right on it.
Number one, don't stop learning. Okay, yeah, this one seems pretty self-explanatory, right? There are always new things to learn, but you never know what you're going to find, so you always have to keep reaching out and keep looking for more. There's always new tools to acquire. In fact, Robert, you like talking about tools in your toolbox?
Yeah, I like talking in general. So I always speak to, I've been in the industry now too long, something like 20 years. And I started as an email administrator working with the ISPs around deliverability, and then deliverability just kind of became a thing, and I've stayed with it all the way through. And every time I think that I've learned everything there is to know about deliverability, something new comes out. You know, Gmail and self-destructing inboxes or email, right? So there's always a new technology. There's GDPR, there's Castle, there's so many different ways that you can continue to evolve and grow your knowledge set. One thing that I always do when I'm working with someone coming into the industry that's newer and just starting to get bearings of what to look at is start with some of the basics, start with understanding what it means to have good delivery, but then start digging in a little deeper. Get your hands dirty, start reading up on some articles and start checking out some of the websites. There's plenty of information to be shared. Enjoy, attend conferences like this one and really start to immerse yourself into it and then continue to iterate.
I would say constant learning is definitely a great thing, and this is a good industry to be in. Obviously, you all care about learning more. You're here today. But I do think it is all about context. So it's great to be up on the newest trends and benchmarks in the industry, but unless you know how that applies to your customer and to your database and to your organization,
right.
So context is king, as it says on there, and I would just remember that as I learn it.
Yeah, I think you have to continually evolve, right? Because what we're talking about this year was different probably than what was talked about at last year's conference, and it will be much different, I'm sure, in a year from now too. And so if you keep sending the same thing to your customers over and over and over again, what worked maybe even 6 months ago is probably not going to work the same way today.
Yeah, and I think that idea of continuing to learn, and as Mary said, that the context piece and the perception piece, it's great to know what's possible, and it's great to know what's out there, but how and if it applies to your program and to your unique set of subscribers. Speaking of them, point number 2, don't forget those people. Don't forget your end user. I think we're all marketers, we're all speaking on behalf of our brand, but we're also just people talking to people, and I think the Chick-fil-A presentation earlier this morning really drove that home. It's about being personal and being able to do that at scale, and I think that applies no matter what your role, no matter what kind of company you work for, is understanding who that person is and being an advocate for that end user, no matter your role. That's what makes you stand out. That's what can really help propel your career forward in this channel, is understanding who that person is. John, I think you said it best, and it's something a lot of people here would agree with, that you're obsessed with the customer.
Yeah, of course. I think everyone here probably is. So, I mean, my role is head of customer marketing, and our team isn't necessarily in charge of email per se, but we're in charge of the customer. And so for us, it's really about knowing who the customer is better than anyone else throughout the organization. And so that means constantly listening to who they are or to what they're saying. And then it's applying email as the channel to talk to them. I think email is so powerful because it's one of those very few channels where you know exactly who you're talking to, and you can get like, instant feedback from that channel too. You know if they're opening it, they know if they're clicking and taking whatever that next action is too. And so for us, it's just constantly thinking about the customer, thinking about what it is you're sending, when you're sending it, and why, so that you kind of keep that relationship strong, not just from the first email they receive, but for many years to come.
And you had said something too when we talked about the idea of continuing to learn, that part of that is being a subscriber and signing up for a whole bunch of emails. And when they come into your inbox, thinking about it, kind of then putting your marketer brain back on, and why did I get this email? Why did they send this to me today? And
Right.
being
What's the intent?
person that we're speaking to.
And unlike our brother and sister channels like social or paid online, they have an infinite number of people they can ultimately talk to. Whereas we as email marketers, we have a finite database. Of course, it grows over time, but we do have a finite number of people that we can talk to. So being a gatekeeper and being a good steward of your database is making sure that your internal stakeholders know that less is more in email, not more is more.
And yeah, and actually that's a really good point to make. In fact, Tara Clark on this very stage last year said that we're the protectors and keepers of the inbox. That has a lot of responsibility. We need to, treat email as sacred as it really is. It's a sacred channel. And be decisive. Don't just wing it, to our next point. Yeah. Know what you're doing. Think about it. Take it slow. In fact, Paige, I know you like to... Sorry, Paige. Yeah, I know you like
Yeah, for us, we don't wing it on many things, and we definitely didn't with email. It was important for us, looking across all of marketing, to pick the right platforms and partners, and several tools had been chosen by, I would say, our C-suite, our CEO and CTO before I joined, and they just weren't the right tools, and we didn't have the right agency helping us. So it was about working to find the right ESP that could deliver what we needed, but not too much more. It was about finding the right agency partner with Brightwave, and we had to try a few out to get to the right fit. It was about, figuring out what the right cadence would be for our consumers, where they would still want to open our emails, and, what is that frequency? And then definitely creating a content plan, because of course, even though consumers sign up for email, it can still be a little invasive. You're kind of like social. You're showing up in their personal territory, and so you need to be polite and conscious and provide value. So finding the right platform, finding the right agency partner, figuring out the right cadence for the connection, and then creating a content plan that would deliver value, but also allow us to test, is something that we still work really hard on every day, to not wing it.
Yeah. I would say, it's data is king, right? So understand your audience, understand how what the cadence should be, and measure it based off of a number of factors. I typically don't like to state any one common, like, this is your silver bullet. I'd rather say it applies differently to everyone in here, right? A Groupon can get away with sending emails daily, and TurboTax not so much, right? So it just depends on who you are and what your audience base will allow for.
And I think that idea of being deliberate and not winging it applies no matter what your role is, whether you're a designer or a strategist or a director or a VP or a deliverability expert. Having that plan and understanding and being purposeful in the actions that you take. Which leads us to our next point, which is don't get ahead of yourself. Part of being deliberate is understanding very firmly where you are today. And you do all this learning, and there's all this really cool stuff coming out in email, but you may not be ready for that yet. You may not be ready for that in a year. So having a really firm understanding of exactly where you stand today and knowing what's possible, but doing it at scale. And Mary, you had said something about the way that automations, or the number of automations that Ferguson has in place right now.
Yeah, I can definitely personally attest to start small and make sure that as you grow, it is a scalable growth. At Ferguson, when I first came on, we only had a handful of automated programs, and there were definitely some gaps that we wanted to fill. So we kind of made that arbitrary statement of, all right, over the next 2 years, put in as many automated programs as we can. Let's shift things to automation. We went literally from 0 to 60 in 2 years, meaning we were left with 60 automated programs across our transactional and marketing platforms. And we just did not have the bandwidth and the resources to keep up with that. And so we quickly learned, all right, let's re-audit, let's go back to the drawing board, and let's make sure in the future that when we're setting things up like this, we're setting ourselves up for success. We have the people and the money to, it's not set it and forget it, so to keep going back and iterating and improving. Because ultimately, while we're creating an experience for the customer, it may not be the best experience if we can't get to it every 6 months.
Yeah, and from our perspective, I think it's interesting. We started very small when I started at Kabbage. We were sending 2 emails a week. One was to existing customers, one was to leads, trying to get them to finish the application. And then it was like 1 month, the numbers were a little slow, and we were like, let's send another email to this group. And then it was like, okay, that kind of worked, and we're just going to send another one. And so we started adding on all of these campaigns, and to the point where it started to become a little, well, burdensome for our team, and probably taxing on the customer as well. So we're actually starting to scale back a little bit, and we are redesigning our emails to have this more modular design so we can kind of slot in different content messages that would replace one of these other emails that we're sending. And so it's easy to start small, but there's a lot of pressure, I think, on the email channel as well to deliver, and it can deliver, as we've seen and heard about all these stats that have been said earlier. And so I just think it's easy to do that, but to also manage whatever pressures you're getting from above and the numbers is something that you have to manage.
Yeah, at Charbroil, we're very aware of the resources that we do not have. And so when I joined, you know, the tool that was there for us, the set of tools clearly said, okay, here you go. You can go do full-on marketing automation. But no one had thought through the resources that it would take, whether in-house or externally. And so we try to keep that in mind, because that allows us to be very committed to making sure that what we are doing, we're doing right and providing that value to the consumer. If we get ahead of ourselves, then something's going to have to go.
Yeah, and I'll just add, even the ISPs appreciate it when you don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah, but every now and then you have to take a risk, and that brings us to our next point. Yeah, you know, I mean, email is a powerful channel, but you have to understand what you're doing, you know? I mean, and sometimes you have to stick your neck out there and just go for it, and that means sometimes you do have to just send without knowing any strategy. That means sometimes you have to try new things, or like the innovation scene at the edge of the inbox would never take place, you know? But sometimes it's just as risky, you know, not sending to everybody on your subscriber set and adjusting your frequency, bringing it down. It can be very risky, especially when you're dealing with the C-class. In fact, Paige, I know you had a story about frequency.
Yep, so when I joined Charbroil, we were sending several emails per week, about 3 per week, and it drove quite a bit of revenue for us, at least on charbroil.com. And we pulled back. The most we ever send is once per week, but we sometimes send only 2 emails per month. And so that was a risk, because it felt like we were supposed to be doing not just pulling back on frequency, but doing automation and sending very prescriptive emails. And you know, you like gas grills, let's send you content about just gas and just charcoal. But we just weren't set up to do that. So we pulled way back on the frequency of emails, but we improved the content. So we actually lost revenue from the email channel during that period of time, but we stemmed the attrition of the list. So we had a very, very large subscriber base, but the drop-off rate was huge. The unsubscribe rate was very, very big. And so now we've sort of right-sized and normalized our subscriber base. And we can now move forward to acquisition again, but we had to actually pull way back.
And John, I think your point was the exact opposite. At Kabbage, you didn't have a choice. You had to just start putting stuff out there and market.
Yeah, I mean, in just a really hyper-growth business, there's really no room to slow down like that. We're trying to do a little bit of that now. I think when you go through situations like that you describe, Paige, it's really important to over-communicate to people, like what's about to happen. Like we're trying this new technique. It could be great, it might not work, but we are completely on top of it, right? And so as long as people understand that and you know you can potentially course correct as you're going through it, I think you'll be all right.
Right, and that's our next point. When we're taking these risks and we're having a plan and we're being deliberate, it's on us as the email marketers to set the expectations for the channel. And Mary, you said it best, I think, on one of our calls, that we control the carrots, and you dangle it out there and you show people what's possible, and they're like, ooh, now they want to eat all the carrots and they want to do all the things, which is really awesome and powerful because it means they understand the channel and they understand what's possible and the really exciting things that email can bring. But it's on us to say yes, but. And so I think for you, you'd said that starts with a process, whether you're a team of 1 wearing 10 hats or a team of 100, that it's all about a process.
Yes, I feel very strongly about how really anything in marketing, but especially email marketing, does start with a process. Like you said, it doesn't matter how many people you have on your team. You want to make sure that you build your email marketing program so that 10 years down the road, there's still that foundation there, even if you've left the organization and new people have come in and they've grown. A process is how you do that. And what I mean by a process is anything from an email style guide. We talked about earlier how designers, sometimes we kind of rally with designers, this color button, this. You can kind of mitigate some of that stuff if you have a turnaround time, SOP documents, naming conventions, project management software, like I said, an email style guide, things like that. And you help to set that expectation so that you're not getting those last minute requests or a lot of those conversations that we tend to have with our internal stakeholders.
Yeah, and I'd say honestly from the deliverability standpoint too, right? I mean, you want to make sure that as you are sending, you're setting those expectations with your recipient base. The better they're engaged and the more engaged they are, that builds reputation, right? It affects a lot of good stuff. So you want to ensure that your recipient base is understanding what you're trying to achieve, and starting slow and building helps set that cadence for them.
Great.
Yeah. So, and speaking of that, so you've got a email program running and everything's looking good, and you've put a lot of work into it, and now you can just sit back and relax, right? Nope. No. You cannot just set it, forget it. You have to continue to innovate. You have to find that next cool thing. You have to make the program better, and try to do new things. Robert, I know in deliverability,
Yeah, that's actually,
setting it and forgetting it is a bad thing, right?
Yeah. I've spoken to this a few times, but it's the one question I hear a lot is, I don't understand why my delivery is being impacted. I haven't changed anything. And so the perception really should be less on what you have changed and why haven't you re-examined what you're changing and continually evolving, because the ISPs are changing. They're constantly adapting. They're constantly learning and trying to understand how they can ensure the best delivery for the senders and for their recipients. More focus on the recipients, but they're still working on both sides, understandably. And at the end of the day, if you're not evolving with that, if you've just set and created a campaign and expect that it's just going to perform well throughout and consistently, you need to take another look at that.
I also think related to that is just this idea, once you set one campaign up, you're probably going to move on to the next campaign and then move on to 4 or 5 others. And if you don't think about how all those campaigns are working with each other, you don't necessarily know what is actually driving any value, right? Because, and we fall into this trap a lot. Like, we'll try to test something, but our control group may not be getting that one particular campaign, but they may have received like 3 other emails during that time. And so we don't necessarily always know what's happening. So it's important. This goes back to this idea of being deliberate, but just really understanding, what your customers are experiencing is critical.
Yeah, I think that it's the idea of maintenance. Like, you have to maintain these programs and you have to come back at regular intervals and check in. I think we talk a lot in the email channel about this idea of continual optimization, and we're always learning and we're always A/B testing, but people do these things and they're testing their subject line every week, but so what? Like, what does that mean? How do you apply it to the rest of your campaigns? Is it impacting your program overall? When are you actually stopping and going back and looking at the last 3 months in total and saying, what did all those tests mean for my program, and how do we apply it going forward? What does it mean for us now?
Absolutely.
And as an email marketer, I don't know if you all would agree, but I feel like we're constantly playing a game of whack-a-mole. Like this issue pops up over here, we knock that down, another one pops up, and it's just kind of like a can of worms that opens itself over time. And so to the don't set it and forget it, one story that came to mind for that was, so we monitor revenue, of course, from emails. Some of them are more just pulse metrics, you know. And we saw that on one of our sites, the revenue had plummeted, and our abandoned cart is really what drives the revenue on that site. So we said, okay, let's try to backtrack into this. We found that because that site had changed the structure of their URL from shop.ferguson.com to fergusonshowrooms.com, our abandoned cart program just stopped completely. And so it's good to help monitor those things or find your pulse metrics that'll help you kind of back into what might be happening that's outside of your control or that you might not have realized would happen from another change.
Right.
Yeah, and thinking about it, changes other teams make too, right?
Yes,
So like,
other teams make,
like-
yep.
Or
This-
ISPs.
Yeah, this,
Yeah.
or like for us, an example would be like we'll send something and the link will work and everything's fine and we have this program and then maybe our developers change something on the site that
That's right.
all of a sudden doesn't work and then customer service tells us, hey, so-and-so just called in and said they couldn't access this part of the site. And we're like, what happened? And no one really communicated that. So trying to make sure, you know, everyone is aware also that these campaigns are running in the background is really important.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think we all understand that every campaign that goes out the door has to have, you know, a success metric tied to it. And we're doing our weekly or monthly reporting and we're looking at trends over time, but that doesn't always tell you that something is broken if you're not looking at the right metric. And it's beyond just what is the metric for that campaign, but what is it for the email channel as a whole? What does email mean within the larger organization? What are we really trying to do here? And I think, Paige, you have a good story there because email is just one piece of this digital puzzle that you manage at Chartwell.
Yeah, so at Charborough, we do media mix modeling. You guys probably do that, some of you. But we had to get into media mix modeling because we were really setting up marketing for the first time. Even though the company's 70 years old, it really had not put any emphasis on marketing ever. And so when we're coming in and asking for money and going into channels like social media and doing more or less, but the right stuff in email and you know, both traditional and digital advertising, we have to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to really help the organization start to believe in the power of marketing, whether it's email or another channel. So we do media mix modeling, and within that we see an extremely high return within email. And so that definitely helps us just tell ourselves on the marketing team that this is still a channel that we need to invest in and make sure that we continue to have the right partners to think about how we can drive that loyalty, because these loyalists are the ones that will take an action. Whatever action you're asking them to take, they will typically take it way more than anyone else through any other channel. They drive a lot of revenue and they're very special to us. But at the same time, you can't look at email and say, well, wow, you guys should just quadruple, quintuple your spend, just double down, because it's not an acquisition tactic. And so kind of like paid search, you have to do the awareness driving advertisement like social media or TV or you know, display and digital video in order to bring people into your brand, bring them into your site, sort of warm them up. And then the ultimate is that, at least for our brand, that email sign up, where now we feel like we have a much closer relationship with them. So for us, it's very, very valuable and helps us understand that we need to continue to invest. But we have to make sure that we keep it in perspective of all of the other channels too, because that return on investment is only going to stay high if we're continuing to add people in.
I would say also, so that you can get a better feel for the return on investment, is to not only define success by, you know, opens and clicks and kind of the customer facing side of things, but how are things happening behind the scenes? It was mentioned earlier that an email took somebody 45 days. So are those time and resources in those work loops and things like that, are they paying off with the opens and the clicks? And so you kind of have to right size that.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have the organization align around, like, what is the role of email for this company, right? So, like in an e-commerce business, it's very much focused on revenue, right? Like, so like I send you an email, you click the email, you go on to make that purchase. It's like, boom, we just drove revenue. I think like even in the case of like Char-Broil, like you're not buying a smoker every 3 months or something like that, but you want to keep Char-Broil top of mind for whenever they're making that next purchase or whatever the next ancillary product's going to be. Similar in our world, so you're not taking a loan necessarily every couple of days or every couple of weeks. So we just need to make sure that we use email as a way to keep us top of mind, make sure that you know you have funds available, make sure that you understand the different ways that the product can work for you. And so there are definitely metrics around like email engagement, but also, and as well as like people going on to take a loan, but then there's something to the effect of like this cumulative set of emails and this communications that you're getting that keeps you connected to the brand.
That's right. Yeah, at Adobe, one of the things we talk about a lot is tools in a toolbox, right? So it's as much as you can have to understand the perspective of your recipients and your clients and getting a good grasp, not looking at it myopically, right? Looking at it from a bunch of different sources and using the greater data set to make your determination.
It goes back to being an advocate for the end user.
Being an advocate,
Understanding-
exactly.
Because the ROI is so incredibly high on this channel, I think across the board, that it's really easy for people to look at email as a workhorse. And if sales are down, send an email. Or if we need more applications, send an email. So setting those expectations and being the voice for your subscriber within your organization.
Yeah, it's great to have email be looked at as like this really powerful channel. Like I love, like our
Absolutely.
sales team will come to us and say, hey,
thankful
can you
for it.
send another email today? Like, and we always have to be like, okay, let's pump the brakes a second. And let's figure out why we're sending this and,
More is not
and
always
what
better.
the impact's actually going to be.
If you
Well,
were a subscriber,
yeah.
would you want to get another email today?
Yeah, really.
That's
And
right.
the type of content, I guess I should say too, I think this is what you were getting into as well, is we send some emails that we're trying to get it's like a discount on grills of a certain type, and we're trying to get people to transact on our website. But then to your point, a lot of our emails are recipes or how-tos or tips and tricks because it may be 5 years before they buy another gas grill. And so how do we keep them wanting to receive our emails for 5 years?
Right.
And that's got to be through really cool recipes and hacks and things like that. And then sometimes, you know, there's just those emails that are sort of like, we have to send this because we have to launch something or someone wants us to send something. So having the different KPIs among the different types and varying it for the consumer based on your brand.
Exactly. So it's saying internally, sure, we'll send that email, but we're only looking at open rates. We just want to get eyeballs on it. We just want people to know that it's a thing. So don't expect money to come into the website from this
That's right.
campaign, and understanding that at the campaign level.
But if you do have a success, you should definitely go and tell everybody about it. And, you know, not just within your company, you should tell the world. You know, be an advocate, be an evangelist for the email channel, get it out there, let everybody know about your successes or your failures, you know. Communicate, tell everybody. Brings us to our next point. Don't keep it to yourself. So, but yeah, so Mary, you've got a lot to say on this. So why don't you go ahead and preach?
I don't know which one I feel more profound about, the process piece or the marketing yourself and getting it out there. Both are near and dear to my heart, but we as marketers, especially email marketers, we kind of put marketing ourselves and our programs on the back burner because we're head down in the day-to-day doing our thing. I constantly encourage my team that it doesn't have to be this new innovative thing that you're doing to want to get it out there. I promise, if you're changing up your headers and footers or something even like that we're all doing, we're all craving that content. So give back to the email community and share your story because I promise somebody wants to hear it. But that's internally too. If you do not currently carve out at least 5% of your time to tell your story internally, and get that internal buy-in, you definitely should start. But as she was saying earlier, the dangling the carrot, just be aware that as you start telling your story internally, that carrot that you're dangling, everybody's gonna want it. So you better be ready for that demand too.
And I think you make a good point that people coming to a conference would never submit a speaker proposal because that story isn't that compelling, or we didn't have a 20% lift in ROI, or
Right.
but you did something, you're out there doing something. And I think we talk so much about the big changes and the big things that people are doing, but 90% of us aren't there. These small changes, these little things that we're doing, if you're doing one new thing a year, as far as I'm concerned, that's a win. You're pushing your program forward at a rate that works for you. You're measuring your success, you're being deliberate about it, and that is a big deal, and that is something to be celebrated. So I think telling every story in email is important.
Every story, yeah, absolutely. Be an evangelist.
And I think it makes you work better when you're doing your work day to day with the end goal of finding something that's noteworthy and that's worthy of telling a story. You're going to work that much harder on it, and you're going to look for those reports and that insight to help craft that email story.
Right.
It certainly makes you feel more accountable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to make sure that people understand you are doing something. Like you didn't just, like we said, just set programs and just let
Not
them
just
run,
checking
and
the
then
boxes.
everything else just kind of doing its thing, but you're actually trying to improve it.
That's right. Kind of share up and out, share up in your organization, help them understand, again, I'll go from the deliverability perspective, but you want to make sure that your organization really understands the impacts that some of these actions can have on your performance, on the brand, on your overall reputation as an organization. There's real accountability there, but also as you learn things and as you're seeing things, share them with the community. So often I'll see something small get mentioned to me in one of the, a Slack channel or something that's just like, hey, are you seeing this at, insert ISP, open it wider. Let's have a big, broad conversation, because it may be something that we all need to talk about. And if it hasn't hit someone yet, maybe it will soon. And that knowledge sharing is meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that brings us to our last point, which is a lot of this is very programmatic in nature, and how do we drive our programs forward and how we tell the story about the program, but what it means for us as email professionals and how it helps us grow. And that is that don't silo yourself. Everyone can tell the story. A technical resource can have valuable strategic insight. A campaign manager can look at a piece of creative and say, why? Why did we do that? So asking the questions and having a voice and inserting yourself in the larger conversation, which I think, Robert, was the point you were making, is take it outside of your little channel and your little team and understand email's role truly at the larger level and what email means in the broader digital landscape of the company.
That's right. And so coming into Adobe, one of the things that I talked about a lot is kind of socializing the idea of deliverability in all areas of an ESP, right? So, or even a major organization like Adobe, right? From legal and compliance and to sales and helping them understand how we can improve, to services, obviously physically working with clients, support, helping them fix issues. Every group, tech ops, deploying and implementing all the SPF and domain keys and authentication methods and such. To the product, making it easier for a client to actually have a good experience. There's so many different ways that email influences a company, helping them understand all the different points of impact and helping be that advocate within your organization that starts really chanting the email story and helping everyone to understand and raise awareness. If for nothing else, I've learned over my years, I've watched how much at all levels of the organization, I can just open eyes sometimes to the real impacts, or positive and negative, emails having on the company, because oftentimes it's just seen as, oh, that's email, let's just deal with that over here in the small little channel, and we'll do all of our other efforts in other places. And it's just not the truth, right? I mean, we all know, we're all here to talk about it. It's a very large, meaningful area that we should all help everyone understand the impacts.
Yeah, I mean, pay attention to what are the problems. I mean, email can solve a lot of problems. It can cause some problems too, but it definitely can solve problems. So if you pay attention to what's going on in the organization and you hear about, some problem with some type of customer, some segment, or you are learning about a new product and you can understand how email can help drive activation of that new product, start thinking about email as a way to solve those company problems, because that's what people are going to care about at the end of the day. It's not, open rates are awesome, and
Right.
this fuzzy idea of engagement is really awesome, but if you are solving a business problem, you're driving revenue, reducing attrition, whatever those core metrics are for the business to be successful, that's when people are going to not only see you as like knowing email, but being somebody who's like awesome in the business.
And I think taking that and applying no matter where you work, that's how, you take this and apply it more broadly, that any of us, no matter what our role or what our company, you can do that. If you spend a little time, like you spend 5% of your time telling a story, spend another 5% of your time really understanding what your organization is trying to achieve.
I think that's it. Everybody go forth and conquer. Now you have a definitive guide to making it big in email marketing. Yes.
We did leave a few minutes for Q&A, so if anyone has questions for the 50 plus years of expertise on the stage, please feel free. We've got mics walking around, I think.
Just need to see a hand if you have a question.
Don't be shy.
Yep, we did it. We told them everything they need to know.
Wow.
Explained it so well.
impressive.
You guys
We
are
have
gonna be
we
a
have one
successful
question.
bunch.
I saw a hand.
What advice can you give to like one-woman show email programs?
Take it slow.
I would say start somewhere.
Yeah.
I think having been in roles where I've worn a lot of hats and I'm coding and pulling the reports and leading the strategy and responsible for, contracts and all of that, it's take it slow,
Set one goal at a
understand
time.
exactly where you are and really be in control of those expectations and managing what's possible, not only within budget, but what you can maintain. Like, sure, I could, work 60-hour weeks and set up 10 new programs, but I can't maintain that. So really setting those expectations very clearly.
I would really think about, what's going to have the biggest impact. So if you're just thinking about email and you're starting off and you're like, well, we should do a newsletter. Well, like, why should you do a newsletter? Is that really what's going to have the biggest impact? So if you have limited resources, and we all do, and you have constraints, think about, what's going to have like the biggest bang for your buck, and that's going to ultimately set you up for the next campaign.
Well, and
Why
I'll-
is my favorite question.
Yeah, why is a great question.
Why?
Yeah, ask it
Five
times.
whys.
Yeah,
Five whys.
And you taking it from my little skew of perspective, right on deliverability, understand how you're performing if you're sending email today, how you're performing currently. All of your marketing efforts could be impacted if you currently don't have good reputation and good deliverability. So start with understanding where you sit as a baseline, understand if you need to start with simple campaigns to build some of that reputation and engagement, or if you're already blazing along and everything's great, then it's more of the what type of engagement do you have.
That's good advice.
Great. Any more? Yep. One more question.
Hey, I had a question because, of course, I've used Litmus very, very often. I use it every day. But is there a tool out there that not only like maybe you use Litmus and something else, so you see what's wrong with your email and the rendering on different email clients, but is there a tool out there that helps you solve what's in your code that's wrong, or say, hey, maybe look at this part, that part, or here's a suggestion? Because I feel like that's the one thing I'm running into where it's like, cool, I can see it doesn't work, but like, how do I figure out what part isn't working? That I struggle with a lot.
Inbox tools. Yeah.
Inbox tools,
Definitely. Wow, that's a really good question. Are you speaking to deliverability or just the code? Just the code.
There's a number of different tools. Yeah.
Log on to Email Geeks and start asking the community on Slack channel, emailgeeks.com.
But I would say to take it a step back too, of course, when you're doing new things, you're going to need to QA and test those.
Yeah.
But I would definitely, again, back to the basics, I know it's been talked about for years now, but we just went modular in December. And so that way our mods, we test those things up front and make sure that they render properly on all devices. And while we thought it was going to kind of cramp our designers' creative flex, it actually, they said, we have 14 mods. It creates millions of opportunities to set it up correctly. And we're dealing with traditional designers, and then it goes to somebody else to code. So there was kind of a tough handoff there before, but going modular and setting those expectations up front of this is what it looks like here, this is what you can design to, and then the coder already has the code there and they're just kind of fitting it in. But I can't say enough good things about true modular.
Take it one line at a time.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I think there was a question over here.
Right over here. Okay, go on.
Can you share a story from
question.
That's a great
I
question.
have a story.
We all have stories.
I mean, I'm not really that big in email.
I was gonna say,
I'm
have
not
a
really
hidden
that
email?
cool.
I guess we do.
I'm a little bit more of a generalist, I guess, but I have an email story from when I was at Coke and I worked on my Coke Rewards, and the process was broken. And so there was really one last approval that should have gone through me, and so there was an email going out and to announce our Super Bowl campaign idea, and it was kind of this secretive campaign where you were going to be very interactive during the Super Bowl, this sort of race. It was this race idea a few years ago, and I woke up and was like checking my email and got the email from my Coke Rewards and saw that the article had already gone live, and I was like, I mean, this is the Super Bowl, and
Right.
I've just outed the whole secret for the campaign. I'm going to not only not be big in email, but I'm not going to be big at all. And anyways, luckily, I told my boss, and we were able to fix it, on the back end. So only a few people opened and saw, and so luckily it never got out. And obviously, I was accountable. And then we went and completely redid the process so that nothing like that would ever happen again. But
And I would say that touches on another point of owning it
Yeah.
when
Yes.
it
Yeah.
happens
Yeah.
immediately and not
Be
trying to fix
responsible.
it first. Like,
Yep.
yeah, that accountability
Mistakes will
piece is
come.
huge.
Yep.
Yes.
We're all
Yes, the
human.
mistakes will come.
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Let's give them a round of applause. And I'm sure there are a lot more questions. And so if you have more questions, just put them on Twitter, #EIQ Gathering, and so we can make sure to answer those for you. So thank you all so much again.